Hi everyone, this is Suey. I am coming to you today to share with you my top 10 books I have read over the years for each year. I mentioned in a video that I have kept track of what books I've read for about 20 to 20-ish years. And somebody said they wanted to know all the books I've read over those 20 years. And I said, maybe I will share with you my top 10 books for each year. And I thought that was a fun idea. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that today because it's the time of year when everybody is really into thinking of their top 10s of whatever for the past year. I love to do top 10 books, top 10 music videos, and top 10 songs, and top 10 dramas. Some of those are on my other channel for us. And in this channel, we're going to talk about top 10 books, but I haven't figured out for 2022 what my top 10 are yet. That'll be a different video. To get us all excited, I thought I would look over my lists from these past years and react to them. So we have got my blog up because that's where everything is in one place. So it's Suey's Books at blogspot.com. This blog I started in 2007. But I started keeping track of what I was reading in 2001. Here's my first little notebook. It's just plain old notebook. This one has books from 2001 to 2007, and I wrote down every book I read and, like a sentence of what it was about and a sentence of what I thought, and I gave them a grade, and I wrote the date that I read it. This was way before Goodreads. Do we know when Goodreads started? This one starts in 2008. I started getting a little lax on keeping track around 2011. I'm still writing them down. 2013 was the last year, so 10 years ago. So Goodreads has been around at least that long because I started keeping track there and not writing them down. And every year I would figure out my favorite books. So on my blog, I have a section at the top here that's books, and then underneath books is favorite books, and then underneath favorite books I've got a list that I need to update of favorite books in different categories. But then down here at the bottom I have every year what's on my top 10. So we're going to go through that. So in 2002, top 10 books. I don't really have these in order, it appears. I might have started ordering them a little bit later on. So Pope Joan. Did I spell that lady's name wrong? Donna? Huh, I think I've left out an N. I see typo right off the bat. Pope Joan. Do you guys remember when this was making a big, huge buzz? I think I've read it twice because we also read it for a book club, so I read it again. Man, that book was crazy good. David Copperfield. Right behind me. David Copperfield. Is this in the camera? I have no idea. Very into Charles Dickens back in the day. And I bet you David Copperfield was on my reading list forever. And I finally got to it that year and absolutely loved it. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This is another big time awesome classic. Probably right behind me right here. And I bet you when I read it in 2002, it was a reread because I think I read it earlier in my life too. I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. This one I get mixed up with another book that has the castle in it. Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. I'm pretty sure this was a reread for me in 2002. I've probably read that book 3 or 4 or 5 times. I don't know. That book blows me away every single time. And one of the best, craziest endings I've ever read, still to this day. The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot. That one's right here behind me in my classics section. And that one was a great kind of I feel like there was a love story, a mystery, sort of a gothic-y feel to it. Yeah, that was good. The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. I don't know how to say her last name. That one was making a big buzz in the book world back at that time, I think. The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. That's when I finally read that book. Emma by Jane Austen. Do you think that was probably a reread. The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. I was going through those at the time. That was not a reread for me. I had not read them until at that point. And then a middle grade book called A Single Shard by Linda Sue Park. Beautiful book. And this was before I was obsessed with Korean stuff. but I still loved it. What do you think of that? It's a Korean story about this little kid and this crazy stuff he went through. I don't remember details about books, guys. You're going to find out that when I go back through this stuff, I don't remember details about stories, but I remember feelings about stories. And this one hits you in the heart big time. I need to reread it for sure, especially now, given my love for the Korean culture since then. Okay, so that's 2002. Let's see if I can go move it back. 2003. What did I love in 2003? John Adams by David McCullough. He's known for writing amazing biographies of all kinds of people, but especially founding fathers and early American stuff. People were raving about that, and I heard so much about that book. So that was the year I picked that one up. Huge, fat, thick thing, that is. I also read Six Wives of Henry VIII by Alison Weir. I think I mentioned when I was talking about my bookshelf tour that I went through a crazy Henry VIII phase, and it was probably due to this book. If you are curious at all about his life and all his wives and all the craziness he did, she did a great job. Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens. Oh my gosh. So I told you I was into Charles Dickens. I kind of have a little phase at that time. I don't remember anything, but I just know that these big fat books of his, if you get into the flow of his style and his language and his writing, then they are like amazing. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Was that when that one came out? Pause. Hello? Where was I? Our family got into Harry Potter maybe at the second book. We didn't discover it with the first book. I think it was the second or the third book. And I had kids that were the age of loving Harry Potter. And so anyways, by the time the Order of the Phoenix came out, we were obviously doing the midnight buying and reading them, you know. A lot of people read them overnight, and I didn't do that. I probably took a week or so to read it. So anyway, that must have been a year for that. Return of the King. So I got it. I got the the third book done from the, what's that called?
Lord of the Rings.
Just the Lord of the Rings trilogy, yeah. East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This was a reread for me because I had read this book back in high school, and I think I read it again that year because of Oprah's book club. And that book is crazy. I don't even know how to describe it. There are some weird people in that book. That's all I know. Life of Pi by Jan Martel. Loved this book. This one kind of blew me away. The ending. Have you guys read it? I'm pretty sure most of you read it. And the ending kind of crazy. It messed with my head. Let's just say that. The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, because that was the thing that year. That was the big year for that book. The Thief Lord by Cornelia Funk. I talked about that when I did the bookshelf tour, and I love her books. And The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. I feel like that was a book club book. I started my book club in 2004. So, but I think I was doing a different book club, and I feel like I read that together with people. So that's my impression of that. But that was a good one. Great books on that list. And it's a mix of all kinds of things. I like that. Nonfiction, kid books, popular books, classics. Dang, I did good back in the day. So 2004. The House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer. So I talked about once in a video about Scholastic Book Fairs. I was in charge of it for 10 years, which meant that I got to read the books ahead of time, and then we would do book talks, and I would read maybe 10 books ahead of the fair, and then I would go and talk to all the kids, and they would come in to the library at the school, and I would tell them about some of the cool books I read to hype them up and make them want to buy the books. And I feel like this was one of those books. The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I finally read the actual book that goes along with that movie. That was awesome. Seabiscuit by Laura Hillenbrand. This was a popular nonfiction book at the time, and the movie was made about it, of the racing horse. And I am not a horse person, but that book was fascinating. Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. Oh my gosh, this book blew me away too. And the ending, also another crazy ending. Oh man, your emotions are so messed with in this book. The Tea Rose is like a English soap opera-y, very character-driven book that I completely fell in love with. Inkheart by Cornelia Funk. Again, I hope I'm saying her name right. So after I read The Thief Lord the year before, obviously I fell in love with her, and then I just devoured everything that she wrote. And this was the beginning of a cool, I think it's middle grade series. Educating Esme. I thought that was for the Scholastic Book Fair also, because as the author, Esme, wrote some other kid book, but then this book was about her life. The Killer Angels. This was one of the first books I did in my book club that I started back in 2004, and it is the story of Gettysburg. The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, one of my favorite books of all time. I think this was a reread for me, and I remember it being one of the most gut-wrenching, cry, sob fest moments in a book reading that I've ever remembered. The end of that book tears my heart out. And I think I did a reread that year for some reason or other. I can't remember why. Between a Rock and a Hard Place. This is the guy who fell while he was hiking in Canyonlands in Utah, here where I live. And he was stuck there for 5 days, and he chopped his own arm off to get out, and he had to hike and make his way to find help. And this is his story, and I was blown away by his book. So, and it's since been made into a movie. Crazy. Okay, so in 2005, I read The Goose Girl. This was when we first knew who Shannon Hill was. She's a local author, and now she's really pretty big and famous. And we met her in 2005, and I read her book, the only book she had at that time. She's got a ton now. Beauty by Robin McKinley. I love this retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Harry and the Half-Blood Prince, obviously that was the next one that came out. The Historian, I've talked about that one already. I love this Dracula. It's not really a retelling. A Dracula book story. Pride and Prejudice, that was probably a reread. A Fine Balance, this takes place in India. Story that rips your heart out. Ink Spell, the next one in the Inkheart series. Shirley by Charlotte Bronte, which is one of her lesser well-known ones. And I quite enjoyed it. Ex Libris, Confessions of a Common Reader. This one was making the rounds in the book world at the time, and so I picked it up, and it was really good, obviously. Doomsday Book. This was another one that was also popular with the book world in that time period. And that's like a science fiction-y, fantasy kind of a book. I remember right? 2006. The Shadow of the Wind. I've talked about this book. I loved it. These Is My Words. That's the story of the pioneer girl who was not educated, and it's a diary format, and she has really bad grammar at the beginning, and then as she learns and becomes not just only educated but also learns how to stand up for herself, then her diary just gets more and more sophisticated. It is the really cool writing. I don't know if it's based on a true story or not, actually, but The Kite Runner. This one ripped my heart out. Sense and Sensibility, Jane Austen again. I seem to have her every year, don't I, back in the day. Uglies was the start of the series of Scott Westfield that everybody was loving. And then I read both Aragon and Eldest by Christopher Paolini, which we all know, if you love dragons, you've got to read those books. Sunshine, another retelling of was it a retelling? I can't remember now. Anyway, I was discovering Robin McKinley fairy tale books. Drowning Ruth. I do not remember that book at all. The Stolen Child. A vague memory of that one. Daughter of Fortune. I've talked about that one. That's the story of a girl who comes from China and lives in San Francisco, and it's really good. Then it was the Twilight years. Oh, here we go. Twilight and New Moon. I read them both. I think I discovered Twilight after New Moon came out. So, I think. I can't remember quite how that one went, but obviously we went through that phase also. 2007. Okay, this is when I started blogging. 2007, right? So my posts are, instead of just a nice little list, I have quite the post. And so it looks like I did a main list and also a YA list, but I did include some YAs in my main list. This is going to get complicated now, and I have honorable mentions. Oh, great. The Book Thief by Marco Zusak. That was the Book Thief year, and that has remained one of my all-time favorite books forever. The Forsyte Saga. I talked about this one a little bit the other day with the bookshelf tour behind me here. Huge fat book, completely full of... Hello?
Are you filming a YouTube video?
Yes. How do you know?
Because you're buying books.
Where was I? Forsyte Saga was like, I was so into that book as far as just the characters go. Love stories everywhere, betrayal everywhere, probably crazy love triangles. I just can't. Family saga. It says saga. It is definitely a saga, and they made a BBC movie of it that's pretty good. Also, The 13th Tale. Everybody was loving that one at that time. Papa Married a Mormon. I'm not sure why I read that one. If it was for a book club or something. Zorro, Isabel Allende. I told you I was into her. Obviously, that one's about Zorro. Awesome book. Harry Potter's next book, Deathly Hallows. 1,000 Splendid Suns. Because of The Kite Runner, I needed to read his other book, and that one was awesome. Eclipse. Yes. Angle of Repose. I heard about Wallace Stegner, and he's kind of a local author back in the day. And that is... he gets a ton of praise for Angle of Repose, and that is kind of a heart-wrenching story also, so I finally got to that one. And Wives and Daughters, we read for book club, and it was a reread for me, and I love that one. Also another great soap opera-y love story, but you have to realize that she died before she finished this book. My book club went ballistic when they realized that, but you can watch the BBC movie adaptation so that you can get an ending. And it's a pretty good ending in that. I won't go through my honorable mentions or my favorite YA books, but you can see them here real quick. Okay, 2008. My regular top 10, I called it. Does that mean I didn't put any YAs in my regular top 10 at all? Huh. Molokai. This is a story of that leper colony in Hawaii. Awesome. Crazy story. Mistborn. I was getting into Brandon Sanderson, so I got Mistborn read then. The Host by Stephanie Meyer. Snowflower and the Secret Fan. That was an Asian Chinese story. And I will never forget the description of foot binding from that book. Ever, ever, ever. The Last Lecture. The Uncommon Reader. This is the same guy that wrote Molokai, so he must be kind of making the rounds. I don't remember that book very well, though. And The Lace Reader, I don't remember. Story of My Life by Helen Keller. Awesome. Awesome. Everybody needs to read that one. If you haven't read it, please bump that one up. Bird by Bird. This is a writing book, so obviously I must have been thinking I was going to start writing at this time. I've been thinking that for years. And The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. This was on Rory's list. Remember I talked about it? And I read it right here. I loved it. 2009. Top 10 of 2009. All the Pretty Horses. I don't think I'd read a Cormac McCarthy yet. And I was pretty much blown away. Atlantis by Brandon Sanderson. I think you're probably going to see him on every single list every year for a little while. The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. That was real popular at that year. It's awesome. Beach Trip. I think this was an ARC that somebody gave me, and I read it randomly, and it was a fun friendship, vacation, travel-y kind of book. The Story of Edgar Sawtelle. I loved that one so much. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Homer and Langley. Homer and Langley by E.L. Doctorow. I think that's the one about their hoarders. Weird story, guys. Weird. The Angel's Game. Reading more by Carlos Ruiz Zafran. The Hotel on Corner of Bitter and Sweet. That's an awesome story about Japanese camps. And The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. So good. On my YA, let's just see which one stands out. I had discovered Melina Marchetta, Jellicoe Road. So good. Loved it. And James Dashner is a local author who I met at a party in 2000, earlier that year, and he was hyping up his book, The Maze Runner. And look, it came out. I read it, and now he's famous for it, and there's tons of movies. It's so crazy. 2010. My favorite books of the year. Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. That was so good. The Wives of Henry Odes. Vague memory of that one. The Sparrow. Oh my gosh. You guys, there's no words to describe how crazy intense this book is, and it rips your heart out. The Help. I had this up on my top 10, so I must have loved it, but now when I look back on it, I'm like, I don't know if it was really that great anymore. But yeah, it was good, and everybody was raving about it. The Passage. I think I might have mentioned this one for my October reads. One of the best zombie books I've ever read. Daughter of the Forest. This is an awesome fantasy book. Coop. Crazy funny nonfiction. Pieces of Sky. That is a Western romance. Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. Everybody was talking about that year, so I was part of that craziness. And The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. Is that the first one in the Wheel of Time? Yeah, I think so. So I loved it, but you'll see that they'll probably be on my list. But I kind of got sick of them after a while. Let me just go back real quick and let's browse real quick through YAs. Anything I want to mention? The Schwa was here, and Ansi Does Time. I love Neil Shusterman. I discovered him that year. And I read Megan Whelan Turner's The Queen of Atola and got into her. Those were crazy good books. And Ali Condi's Match series started that year. Okay. 2011. Big Kid Books, I called him. The Night Circus. I loved it. I know some people thought it was too weird, I guess. The Way of Kings. That is the first of Brandon Sanderson's huge... what's that series called? Stormlight Archive. Yes. Loved it. The Name of the Wind is also an awesome series that I started that year. Room by Emma Donoghue. I think I talked about that one once before when she was kidnapped and has a baby. Major Pettigrew's Last Stand. Everybody was raving about that one, and so I read that and enjoyed it. Under the Dome I read with a friend. Otherwise I probably would have never read it. Stephen King. The Soldier's Wife. I Don't Want to Kill You by Dan Wells. The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. And The Gargoyle by Andrew Davidson. Very good books. What stands out to me in Top 10 YA? I was really into Marcus Zusak, so I was rereading his stuff and loving them. I discovered David Allman, Skellig. His books blow me away. So emotionally powerful. More Neil Shusterman, of course. 2012. The Hollow City by Dan Wells. I've talked about this one before. It's a scary book. The House at Tinford. I feel like that one was like a castle-y, England-y thing. The Little Stranger, I talked about that one. Edenbrook. A local author she wrote a Regency romance that's so funny and awesome and a great love story. About a Boy. I don't remember that one very well. The second one, The Wise Man's Fear, second one in that series. Precious Bane we read for book club. Ready Player One, because that was the craze. Forever Odd was my friend's favorite series, so I started reading some of those books. And then Mrs. Mike, which is a classic. That's fun. Classic pioneer story. In my YA books, I read Finnegan of the Rock, first in a series that I absolutely love. I got The Hobbit finally read. I never read those as a kid, like I said before. Lola and the Boy Next Door. Love that book. And then The Raven Boys. Yes, those are awesome. 2013. Blackmore was another book from Julianne Donaldson. Maybe not quite as funny, a little more darker than Edenbrook, but still really good. And I read the first one in Mary V. Snyder's book, Poison Study, and the second one is up there on my shelf, waiting for me to read still. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, very popular book that year. And The Mountains Echoed, because I was into that guy, I can't say his name, the Kite Runner author. Fiesta of Smoke, I think that was a random book somebody sent me to read for my blog, and sometimes those books end up being like amazing. You never know what you're going to get. I must have loved that one. The History of Love, I read that one for book club, and also because a dude at the library that I work with, it's his favorite book, and I needed to know why. The World's Strongest Librarian is about this dude who works at the library. He has a crazy, interesting story, and we had him come to a book club and visit us. That was fun. Bellman in Black, by the same author that wrote The 13th Tale. I remember it being kind of creepy. Visiting Tom by Michael Perry, another funny nonfiction, just memoir kind of story. And Beautiful Ruins is another one that I remember just getting randomly, and I was blown away by that book. Daughters, Smoke and Bone I loved, Legend I loved. Those were the beginning of some series that I tried to keep up with, but I don't know if I've actually ever finished. And Casey West, first time she appears on my list. This is a blog post where I started keeping track of all my numbers, and I put my top favorites in as part of that post. Unbroken, another really amazing story that Laura Hillenbrand writes about the World War II prisoners. And I read Carrie Elwes's book about his memoir about being in The Princess Bride, and we met him that year. Here's a Peter Pan retelling by Lisa Jensen. I randomly got that one too. It's called Alias Hook by Lisa Jensen. The second in the Stormlight Archives, awesome, and that's where I stopped. So I'm stuck on the third book. I need to keep going, but they intimidate me now. And The Enchanted by Renee Denfield. I'm reading my thing about it, and I don't remember that one very well. And The Forgotten Garden, that was the first Kate Morton I read, and I loved. So that's why I keep wanting to read more of hers. And then, so that was only 6. And then we have, I did 14 YAs to make an even top 20. All the Truth That's in Me by Julie Berry, that book blew me away. The Kiss of Deception by Mary Pearson, who's the same author of the Fox Chronicles, which is a series that I'm trying to catch up on right now. And The Winner's Curse. Those 2 books I read that same year, and I sometimes get them mixed up because they're very similar in feel. But I loved both series. Marie Rutkoski is the author of The Winner's Curse. That's an awesome series. And then my favorite, Casey West, On the Fence, I read that year. It's a friends to lovers romance. The Martian, that was the year of The Martian. That was a great book. It feels so real. Like it could have actually really happened. Like it's a memoir. So good. These Broken Stars, that was the year that happened. Illuminae, that was the year that happened. Some of these great books, all in the same year.
What year is it?
2015. And I was just realizing that this book that I want to read, 2015 was the year everybody was talking about this one. So that was the year I should have been reading it. Tightrope Walkers by David Allman. Like I said, that author blows me away. I've got one of his upstairs waiting for me to read that I haven't gotten to yet. Oh, The Winter's Crime is the second in that series I was talking about. The Golem and the Genie. That's awesome. Fantasy. The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord, a nice YA romance. Bone Gap, that's kind of a crazy magic realism YA. And Stitching Snow is a fairy tale retelling. 2016. Well, this is the year that my reading started to suffer for reasons. So I continued on with all those series that I've been talking about. Is Winter by Marissa Meyer. That's not the first. I must have been liking that fourth one more than the others didn't end up on my list before. More Casey West, Bridget Spain, local authors that I was supporting. Loved their books. Ali Condi's books, Summer Lost. It's in middle grade. I am skipping over them quickly because some of them are like series that I've already talked about. All the Light We Cannot See was very popular that year too. And I read a lot of these books for an award. It's kind of a local award that the Library Association here in Utah does. And so I would read these books to help with the long list of that award. Maybe we should shut the door. Okay. In 2017, so like I said, I would be reading a lot of YA books for this library thing that I was doing, and discover so many great books that way that I wouldn't have found on my own. Deacon Locke Went to Prom is one of those. Loved that one. Also Eliza and Her Monsters. Loved that one. Letters to the Lost. Loved that one. Bridget Kemmerer. And I love everything by her since then. Jemina is the second in that Illuminae series. It's over there. I think there's a third. I haven't gotten to it yet. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch was that year. What Alice Forgot by Leanne Moriarty. That was my first Leanne Moriarty book because my book club is really, really into her. So we read a lot of her books for book club. The Game of Love and Death. That was another YA from that list I was talking about. The Sugar Queen was a book club book. And that was the first Sarah Addison Allen book I read. Goodbye Days by Jeff Zentner. That was a sad one, I remember. Tell Me Three Things. That was fun. A really fun book, I remember. As you can see, I have little blurbs on my blog here about all these books. If you want to go read more detail about my thoughts. Okay, 2018. I discovered Six of Crows. I remember I had heard people raving about that book. Finally got to it that year. I'm starting to have my Korean obsession, so I read a couple books this year about North Korean defectors. Just these two books. Every Falling Star and... Oh wait, the other one doesn't come until the next year. The other Korean book I read is down here called Please Look After Mom. That was awesome. And Every Falling Star is sort of a YA nonfiction book about a Korean defector who was 16 and mind-blowing. Andy Ellis is another local author who writes really poignant, really thought-provoking middle grade books. And You May Already Be a Winner is one of those. And The End or something like that. So both those books ended up on my favorites. The Orphan Keeper was really popular around here. I'm not sure if that was just more of a local popular book or a widely popular book. And this was the Bridge of Clay year. I looked forward to this book some. So this is 2018, so it was 2007. I loved The Book Thief, right? And we waited that long for a new book by him, which finally happened that year. Some of my friends I know, and a lot of people had a struggle with it, didn't like it so much. I still loved it. Gentleman in Moscow. That was sort of a buzzy book that year. And we read it or maybe it was the year before. We read it for book club. Please Look After Mom is the Korean story of a Korean family. Their mom, they lose their mom basically. A Man Called Ove, which is going to be made into a movie with Tom Hanks. I saw the preview for it the other day. It looks really good. I'm so excited for that. Exo by Fonda Lee was a crazy science fiction YA book that I read for that award thing that I was talking about. 2019. Before We Were Yours. I think this is about that orphan place and people stole kids. These kids got stolen from their family, and then somebody they went to this orphan place, and anyway, yeah, I think that's what that one's about. Kafka on the Shore, oh my word. That was my first Haruki Murakami book, and it was pretty mind-boggling, and I am intrigued to read more of his if I can gird up my reading prowess, because they are not easy, weird, crazy, but so good. The Girl with Seven Names, that is the other one about a North Korean defector. Pachinko by Min Chin Lee. Do you see a pattern here? Oh, so I started reading some Asian books this year and trying to promote them on the blog and my channel. Anyways, I loved this one. It is a huge, sweeping family saga that takes place in both Korea and Japan. Educated by Tara Westover was also a big buzzy book, and it takes place just a little ways north of here, and we were very intrigued about this story, and I could not stop thinking about it after I read it. A Darker Shade of Magic for book club, really awesome science fiction book. Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahira Mafi.
Tahira.
I think I said pretty good. Loved that one. Dry by Neil Shusterman. This book will make you not take water for granted. You should read it. Geekarella is just a fun YA fun YA romance, and so is Alex Approximately. Awesome books there that I just enjoyed, fun fluff books. 2020 for book club, we read the next book that Erin Morgenstern wrote called The Starless Sea. And then we also read The Body by Bill Bryson, which was fascinating. And we read, and for fun, I read Tweet Cute by Emma Lord, which is another author that I am learning that I pretty much love all her books. We read Resistance. Most of these are book club books. Good thing I have book club, huh? Resistance by Jennifer A. Nilsson. It talks about a underground thing that happened during the World War II that kids were running. Station 11 is apocalyptic, dystopian. I felt like there were some weird, creepy things that were science fiction-y, but I'm remembering probably not right. The First 15 Lives of Harry What's-His-Face is science fiction, though, because he relives his life over and over and over again. Little Fires Everywhere, another buzzy book that we read for book club. That was really good. Scythe by Neil Shusterman, the first of that series. Love at First Sight. This is about a blind kid falling in love. Right? Did you read this one?
Love and First Sight.
Life and First Sight. Sorry, Love and First Sight. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Because we had to do more Hunger Games stuff. Hunger Games weren't on my list during the time. I think they were probably on my favorite YA books back when I was splitting the categories. Now, last year's favorite books. Spinning Silver is the retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. Sort of. It's crazy detailed. And then 96 Miles is an apocalyptic-ish kind of story where the electricity goes off and these kids have to fend for themselves. And it's crazy intense. Born a Crime, Trevor Noah's book. Really good. The Black Witch was the first in that series I've talked about before. It's kind of like a Harry Potter kind of a book. Piranesi by Susanna Clark. Oh my gosh, I have no way to describe this book. Let me know if you guys have read this book and what you think of it. I have no idea how to describe it. It's so weird. What I Like About You, a fun, cute YA romance. My Life as a Potato is a funny middle grade about a dude who has to dress up as a potato for his school's mascot. Anxious People. I didn't like this one at first, but by the end I liked it. It's reminded me a little bit of like Bel Canto, where people are in a kidnapping situation and then they all bond, basically. A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow, and The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary, which we read for book club. And that's the one where they're sharing a space, but the guy works at night and the girl works in the day, so they don't see each other, but then they somehow fall in love. I think that's that one. All right, that's all my top 10 books over the past whatever many years that is. Hopefully you found some favorites that you also have, or some ones you hadn't heard of that maybe you want to go check out. So let me know what you end up doing, and look forward to my video where I will talk about my favorites from this past year. That'll be coming up as soon as I know what they are. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy reading. See you next time. Bye.